Let's explore this further and what it means for the ANC's conference in December with Dr. Fikile Vilakazi from the University of Kwazulu-Natal's School of Social Sciences. Dr. Vilakazi, thank you so much for coming on to the program. Let's start. Was it a surprise outcome when you saw the results being announced last night?
Bongiwe, a good evening to you and to the viewers. It was a shocking outcome. It was a shocking outcome, but not surprising, because it just confirms the character of the African National Congress, which we have seen, emerging itself for the last couple of years, where it has become common practice within the African National Congress to allow, corruption to flourish, to allow unethical leadership to flourish and find leverage. So the fact that Umama Zandile Gumede has won with the majority vote at Ethekwini region is absolutely not surprising. I mean, there were anticipations that perhaps the renewal faction may find its way through. Perhaps the radical economic transformation faction may change its mind, but they didn't. And that for me is something that just confirms that something has deeply gone wrong within the ruling party of South Africa. And I think that it's something that citizens have got to be aware of. And
pardon me, Doctor, according to you, what would you say has gone wrong? Because this is not the first time we're finding ourselves here in such a short space of time. I mean, we saw in Mpumalanga last weekend, for example, the treasurer, Mandla Msibi, who was already stepping aside because he's got those murder charges against him in court, agreeing to step aside after being elected as treasurer. You're seeing some reports suggesting that Denim Caesar, for example, in Limpopo, is eyeing the provincial chair position, and we know there's VBS-related charges that he's facing. Then in the Eastern Cape, you're seeing around Untutu as well, believing, according to some reports, that he's campaigning for the provincial secretary position, among others. I wonder, when you look at where we find ourselves now with the ANC, why do you think the party keeps on finding itself here with individuals that you've just described?
We see it also in Malahleni with the Mashab. The challenge of what is happening within the African National Congress is a mirror of what is happening within the political environment of South Africa, which has become a highly neoliberal state, right? What is happening here is that the African National Congress has become a money-making scheme. People really garner for political office so that they're able to control budgets within departments, so that they're able to have power over the tender processes and so on. And of course, everything else that we know of happens. So that is the biggest problem. The morale of our society has been depleted. What we also are seeing is that the African National Congress that went into exile in the 80s, in the 60s, has changed character. Right, where we had the United Democratic Front rising in the 80s, really leading and garnering all of us in South Africa towards the liberation movement agenda. And we were hopeful that when leaders arrived back from exile, that they would be able to then continue the agenda of what was formed in 1912, when we formed the African Natives National Congress. And that did not happen. I do not know what happened in exile. I do not know what happened in the forests, but something fundamentally happened there that has changed the character of our politics, that has changed the character of our leadership. So when the leadership came back, it became a leadership that, was rallied towards a neoliberal agenda, which is an agenda of capitalism, an agenda that seeks to just gain for self. And not for citizens of South Africa, which is why the taxpayers have been eroded. We did not see service delivery happening.
Pardon me, Dr. Vilakazi, we're almost out of time, but there are some who are saying that a Gumede win, for example, in Ethekwini, is a huge blow and a huge setback for the current ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and his camp, and also arguing that it could also have serious ramifications for the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal as well in terms of its leadership. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are two things that I have been talking about. One of them is the feminist question, right? One of them is the fact that Umama Zandile Gumede represents a woman's body, represents a feminist leadership in that sense, which has been a cry of the feminist movement in the country to say, 110 years, African National Congress, can you please have a feminist leading the organization? So we are seeing the radical economic transformation sort of taking us to that direction. They are looking at Mama Zandile Sisulu, for example, contesting for presidency. The challenge, however, even as we do that, which may be highly appealing to the feminist movement in the country, gender activists in the country, and so on, the problem is that of character. The problem is that of trust that has been eroded deeply because of this cloud of corruption that is surrounding the radical economic transformation faction, including women's bodies that are rising for leadership within the African National Congress. So that is what we are seeing that is probably going to happen as we head towards December elections, as we head towards the July provincial conference here in Kwazulu-Natal. But women's bodies are going to continue to be used in that way. I'm talking with the likes of Umama Zandile Sisulu. I'm talking the likes of Umama Zandile. I'm talking the likes here at Ethekwini of Umama Zandile Gumede. So, where we are hungry for feminist leadership, but how it is brought into surface is highly problematic. And that is, for me, a big issue.
As a final question, very briefly, all of this brings us to the one point of the step-aside resolution of the ANC, and we're looking at it, of course, potentially coming under scrutiny in December. Listening to Zandile Gumede yesterday, speaking to one of our colleagues, she said that, for example, that she's not going to talk much about the step-aside resolution, but it's not nice, because the Constitution talks about, being innocent until proven guilty, but with step-aside, you must step aside pending those charges. And she even alluded to the fact that the branches have spoken around this and may challenge this in December. Of course, this is not the only time where we are seeing this. Even in other reports, they're suggesting that some branch, delegates are looking to challenge this particular step-aside resolution in December. I wonder, what does this then mean for the ANC? Could we see some of those who've been asked to step aside at a national level making a comeback in December?
Possibly we can. If we can see them coming up at regional level, it has happened in Mpumalanga, it happened in Malahleni, it has happened here at Ethekwini. We are likely to then see them come back even at national level. We may see the likes of Esma Khashule coming back. If the ANC does not really review the manner in which the step-aside policy is being implemented. And my sense, in my reading, is that the step-aside policy is being used by that faction that is under investigation as a political tool to undermine the current leadership of the African National Congress, to undermine the renewal project of the African National Congress, which is highly problematic. So my sense is that if you leave this gap unattended, if you leave this loophole of the step-aside policy unattended, it is going to replay itself in December, to the detriment of South Africa, to the detriment of the country, in the manner that we see it unfolding itself unabated within regions of the African National Congress.
Dr. Vilakazi, we wait to see then how this plays itself out, but thank you so much for your time and really giving us your insights this afternoon. That was Dr. Fikile Vilakazi from the University of KwaZulu-Natal's School of Social Sciences.